You're listening to the Himal South Asian podcast, Partitions of the Heart, Conversations with Harsh Mander. This is Season 1, Muslim Life and Death in Modi's India.
Salam, Namaste, Zindabad, friends. I welcome you to another episode of the series Partitions of the Heart. In this season, we are talking about the crisis of India's Muslims. I'm Harsh Mander, and we're doing this podcast series for Himal, which is this very special publication which for the last 35 years has been looking at South Asia. I'm truly delighted with the guest we have today, Zeyad Masroor Khan. He recently wrote a book, City on Fire, A Boyhood in Aligarh, which truly I rate as one of my favorite books in recent times. It touched me deeply, it made me smile, it made me at times brought tears to my eyes. It's a very significant book because in it Ziyad talks about his childhood and his coming of age, living in what can only be called a ghetto in Aligarh between riots. And we thought it was fitting to actually film this episode in his home, precisely what he describes in this book. And so we're really sitting in a small angan outside his room in this home. The extraordinary thing about this book is it brings with very graphic reality the lived experience of a less privileged Muslim child or boy growing up amidst recurring riots, but it's also his worldview, how he looks at himself, his family, his community, and his country, and he describes everything also with a very special kind of self-deprecating humor. So this book is something that we'll keep returning to in the course of the discussions today. But Ziyad, I really wanted to start somewhere else, and this was a conversation that we had, a public conversation, where I asked you a question, and that's the question I want to ask you again. In your book, you describe that after 1947 and partition, a large part of your father's family chose to go to Pakistan. Your father was determined until the end that this was his country and he would not move from here. So the question that, and in the course of your book, you also describe how you interrogate that choice, and towards the end of the book, you get closer and closer to endorsing his choice, if I'm correct. So the question I'd ask you is, do you think your father made the right choice? And I remember your answer. In fact, I've repeated it to many friends. What you had said was that first, if I had a time machine, I could go back to 1947. You would tell your Abbu that this is the choice you must make. And then you went on to say something very interesting. You said, and I'll say it first in Hindustani and then I'll translate. You said कि इंडिया को कई बार गलत फहमी है कि उनको मेरी ज़रूरत नहीं है, लेकिन मैं जानता हूँ कि मुझे मेरे देश को मेरी बहुत ज़रूरत है. So what you said was that sometimes India is under the misunderstanding that it doesn't need me, but I know how much my country needs me. And that was a very interesting formulation. And you said, I want to live in this country because my country needs me.
Yeah.
So back again, did your father make the right choice in 1947?
I think I am very sure Like there is no other way I would have lived anywhere else apart from India, and especially this ghetto. This ghetto in Aligarh, it's called Uppercote.
Yeah.
I grew up here. If I had a choice, I will always be born here. Like even though I think many writers say, like if whatever struggles or traumas that you might have seen,
Yeah.
if I hadn't been seen those traumas and those heartbreaks,
You
and
wouldn't have been the person
I
you
wouldn't
are.
have been the person that I am. I wouldn't have been a writer. I wouldn't have seen the world through my eyes.
And you wouldn't have been a compassionate observer of our social reality.
Of course. So I think and the kind of experiences that India offers, even with all the state trying to and the parties trying to communalize and politicize us on religious lines, but even on the ground there is a resistance for people to be polarized. Even though it's I can see like it is a system trying to polarize people on communal lines, and yes, they are being. I will not say that they are not being polarized, but if you look closely, there is a resistance.
Yeah.
They see through it.
So what is the resistance? I mean, I think this is a very special thing that you're saying. In everyday living, uh, uh, in the midst of probably the worst phase of communal mobilization in India after partition, you're still seeing everyday resistance. Could you describe that a little?
I think like anybody, whoever you meet, and like if I am offering Ramadan, and anybody who, any person of any, if they are Hindu, if they try to be nice to me, even with when the media and the state and even the law enforcement or see, they are trying to, polarize us on religious lines, and it's a constant propaganda all the time.
All the time.
But even then, like if in my area, if I go downstairs, like like it's a just there, like it's a Hindu population area,
Yeah,
and if
you're at the border, as you say, of
yeah,
your ghetto.
ghetto. So this is, as I call in my book, this is Uppercote, UK as I call it.
Yes.
And this is the border of UK, my home, Harsh Manzil.
Yeah.
So if I go there, like
Do you need a visa?
no. I think if the states and the powers that we have
They would like
they would like to have us have visas.
Yeah.
But and I see that when there is no political agenda and when there is no tension in the air, which is always artificial, people are so generally nice, and like if my mother, whenever she comes from here, my mother is slightly forgetful. She will sometimes forget taking money, change. So there are all of these people, my neighbors, they will help me. They will help my mother. They will sometimes bring our groceries upstairs. It's a slope. So at the same time, so when there is no,
At the same time, there's of hate, you still see a community across religion, across caste and class living together.
Yeah.
That's where, and I thought I would, I've ended every episode by every conversation in this series with the question, where do you see hope? But you've started with hope.
yeah,
You say,
I've
where do you see hope? You say, in the way ordinary
The
people
way-
are living their lives.
and like I think like whatever, when people, privileged people like us, and like there is that India is being changed.
Yes.
So like in that sense, like we acknowledge that India is not what the powerful want it to be.
Yeah. They're trying to push it in a direction.
They're trying to push it in a direction which it's naturally isn't. If the politicians and the people, I think the natural tendency of the people, especially Indian people, is to be at peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like with little skirmishes, clashes, which some eventually they manage on their own. So, and this is like a, India, whenever you look at India, you cannot forget about the concept of family. And like like in India, and with all it problems and toxicity, like our families, like whenever we have struggles in our families, in joint families, and then we eventually
we still come
come together.
Yeah. I've noticed this, in fact, again, much more in working class families. The brothers may have a bitter fallout, whatever, but if one of them gets sick in hospital, the other brothers will be there and they'll take care. I mean, so there is. I find it interesting that you're saying this when your book is about also about living through riots, after riots.
Yeah.
So why did that not change your belief in an India where we live together with peace? When you've actually, your childhood has been punctuated by regular riots.
Because like there are two things. Like first, I'll start with my personal experiences and what I've read. So like I read like during the research of my book, I read like there is an American researcher called Paul Brass.
Yes.
He did extensive research on India.
He's the best chronicler of riots in India.
In
today.
India. So Paul Brass writes about internalized, right, riot system,
Riot system, riot producing
institutionalized.
machineries,
Yeah.
and he's done a lot of his fieldwork in
Aligarh.
Aligarh.
In Aligarh.
Yeah.
So when you think about institutional riot system, and when I read that book and I could see, look, okay, this has been my life.
Yes. Yes.
So like there is, because I can still, because I have very clearly seen how riots are organized.
Yeah.
They don't happen. Anybody who has seen communal violence in India closely will understand that they are organized and they not happen.
And they're not spontaneous.
They're not spontaneous. Very few times they are spontaneous.
I mean, I think we saw riots last during partition. Those were really riots, where spontaneously people of two religious communities battled each other, or three with the Sikhs as well. But I totally agree, and I have sort of seen riots very closely in many capacities. I was a district magistrate in 6 districts. I've handled riots through a very turbulent period. As a human rights worker from Gujarat onwards, I worked. As a researcher, I've studied them. And I totally endorse your observation that riots don't spontaneously happen, what we call riots.
Yeah.
They are organized. There's a manufacture of hatred. There's an organization of the logistics of the riots. I mean, people don't suddenly have daggers and Molotov cocktails and voter lists and gas cylinders and all of this. So what you're saying, and what I'm hearing you saying, is that I can still believe in my people because they don't spontaneously get into riots. It is organized by sort of communal organizations backed by the state.
Backed by this. And like even if you talk about lynchings, and like I will not say like some lynchings are not spontaneous.
Yeah.
People have, like people have their, I will not deny that people have their prejudices. They have some people have that, and we will have to acknowledge it. But at the same time, even if you think about lynchings, many of those, most of those have been premeditated. If you look at closely, so like this idea, like when people talk about communal violence or lynchings or hate crimes, and they think they just happen out of thin air. I don't agree with that. I think most of them, a large majority of them are premeditated.
Yeah.
If I talk about the riots in Aligarh, anybody who knows anything, will know who will benefit out of these riots.
Yeah.
So there is mostly an industrialist or a person who wants to grab some land
and a politicians who want to sort of benefit from the polarization. Right.
Or like I think unlike somebody, a trader who wants some people to be removed from some part of and they want to scare and drive them off. So like all of these mechanisms have to be clearly understood. At the same time, I will not say people are not polarized, they are. But until and unless an external agency pushes them to be violent and promotes that violence, most of the time I have seen them peacefully coexisting in Aligarh. Even in Aligarh, like for the last 20 years,
one of the most riot prone,
one of the most sensitive areas. Like after partition, like when I was growing up, it was said to be a seasonal thing, and every season there will be a riot in Aligarh.
So Zeyad, I still want to go back to where I started. This idea that my country needs me. And in this, I think you've gone a little further even than something that Maulana Azad would say when the idea of Pakistan came up. He said, I'm Muslim and I'm Indian, and both these identities cannot be taken away from me. But you're saying even more than that. I'm Muslim and I'm Indian, and I love my country, and my country needs me. Would you like to, Where does this come from?
Like I think, I came into journalism when I was so much fed up of the popular discourse
Hmm.
and how Muslims are represented, and yeah, how even Hindus are represented.
Hmm.
So, most of the people, they will say what the media will try to elicit, which
Right.
is always more, controversial, divisive. So I think at this point in time, anybody who says, the truth, anybody who says things how it is, and it can be any person from any community.
Right.
We need more people like that. People who don't like sugarcoat thing accordingly. People who don't say what the state wants us to say.
So you're saying the country needs me because I do truth telling.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one very good reason, and that truth telling is particularly important in times of where the social fabric is tearing apart. What else? Why does the country need you? What other reasons does the country need you?
I think, like, especially among younger Muslims, I see a lot of despair.
Okay.
Like things, can't be changed. And like when because many of these people have, grown up in, like 90s and then
Yeah.
2000s. But I think I, coming from Aligarh, I have, which is fortunately, unfortunately, a city caught up in time.
Yeah.
Aligarh has been like this, I think, since 30 years.
So it's like in a time warp, in a sense.
It's time capsule. Aligarh, whenever I move it, when I go to Delhi or Bombay, the things are changing. But in Aligarh, I have been lucky to see India has how it was envisioned by Nehru and Gandhi. Like people living close by, people having homes close by, and people having shops nearby, and they have having family connections. I cannot, even though whatever I see, of course, like the violence is happening, but I have a reference point that India could be this as well. So in that sense,
So you feel the other reason is that you feel you have a major role in in helping your fellow young Muslim men and women emerge from the sense of despair that they're feeling in these times.
that makes sense.
So these are two very good reasons why your country needs you.
Another last, I think I'll help, and even through this book,
Yeah.
I think, I also think, like I can tell stories.
Yeah.
I have a gift to tell stories.
You do have a gift to tell
and
stories.
I want to, like at the same time, I think, like Muslims, especially, people from marginalized communities, Dalits, Muslims, women, they need to, in the times of intense, intense discrimination, they need to rehumanize themselves. Sometimes we have to forget our identities. Even though, however, identities are, pushed down upon us, we have to
Our shared humanity,
shared
remembering our shared
humanity.
humanity. Yeah.
So I think I want to, like, like at any point, like even when the violence is happening, even when the somebody is, I cannot, for some reason how I've been brought up, I cannot forget that those at the other end of the end, they are humans too, and the people on the receiving end, they are humans too. And if we remember this, if we remember these commonalities rather than those divisions that people want us to believe in, I think it will change our perspective in a, it's very small when we think about ourselves. Okay, I am a Muslim, I can only have to think about Muslim. Islam doesn't say that.
Yeah.
Now
Definitely.
neither Hinduism says that. So I think we need to build bridges. That's what we need.
And related to this, there's a lovely passage in your book where you describe, I think, coming back on a school bus
Yeah.
and a riot going on, and it was a man who you otherwise saw as a bit of a sort of uh, bit of a gunda kind of person, uh, who staked his life to save you. So tell us a little bit about that.
So I think, just like 5 minutes walk away from here, I used to go to Jama Masjid nearby to catch my bus to school.
Okay.
And I used to come back here. So once when I was coming back, a Hindu mob, during a riot, they surrounded my bus, and one of my neighborhood boys who knew me pointed me out as a Muslim.
Okay.
And all of that has been described in the book. And like there were like 40-50 people, and there were like four or five children, including me, Muslim, in the bus, and the mob was baying for a blood. Like that was clear, or they wanted to beat us up or hurt us.
Whatever.
In any way, they were very angry at that point. And that point, like our, somebody, he was, somebody who, he was at that point, he was just accompanying us. He used to run our bus services, not a conductor, but he was helping us secure our way. And he kept at the risk of his life, he kept fighting the mob. I will not let you enter the
Bus.
enter like through his sheer courage and through his sheer determination. I will not let you enter the bus. I will not let you hurt the kids. And I am sitting here. If that person wouldn't have been there, I will perhaps not been here. So I, even however hard our try and however polarization, I don't know. I don't have it in me. Like, even though, like our country has, of course, like there is oppression of Muslims. I will not deny it. I cannot bring myself to hate Hindus. I don't have it. Like at one point, there was a Hindu who saved my life.
Yes.
And fought his community, people from his community, and at the same time Muslims. Like, and I would like, I don't know, if something happens like that, like I would like in my, like that superhero act, like that defines us, that raises us from being mere humans. I think it should, sometimes people like us also need to follow that.
A moral superhero.
Yeah.
I really like that passage and that articulation, because I've seen, Gujarat. I was emotionally devastated by the stories I kept hearing, because the kind of cruelty, especially targeting children and women. My wife would tell me that I, get up in a kind of nightmare kind of way at night. Looking back, I realized that what helped me heal was that I can throw a challenge to anybody.
Yeah.
That you tell me one incident of this kind of cruelty in Gujarat. In the same location, I'll find you at least 3 stories of courage and kindness.
Yeah.
And I hold on to that. And it was those stories of courage and kindness that I think we also need to remember. So every year we used to do a remembrance of the Gujarat, and the anniversary. But we decided, let's do it in a way that can also heal. So we would honor different people who had saved lives of the other community.
Yeah.
And these stories are not unusual. So I think that and I studied Nazi Germany very closely, and historians tell me that the proportion of Germans who saved Jewish lives was about 0.01%. So I think perhaps my source of hope is also precisely this, that it's certainly not 0.01%. I mean, it's a pretty significant percentage who also save lives. The stories of partition are also full of extraordinary stories of courage. I mean, both of us sitting here, remembering and acknowledging the brutality of communal violence, but also remembering acts of courage and kindness. I think that is probably where we can still derive hope. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think like I, whenever I, whatever is happening in the country, and like the riots, the violence, the lynchings, and like systematic, oppression of Muslims by the state and the authorities, the only respite for me is my Hindu friends, who are also at a threat, for speaking against these issues, against this oppression and against this marginalization of Muslims in every weaker community right now. Like the government is basically, the state is basically anti-poor, anti-weak. Whoever.
It's anti-informal. I mean, I see the first declared enemy of our government, of this present regime, is Muslims and to some extent Christian minorities. But then it is people who stand with them and with the constitution. That is the next set of enemies. I don't imagine that we might have a Holocaust with 200 million people being killed in the way that 6 million Jews were killed. But there are other ways that genocides can unfold. How, as a young Muslim from a slightly less privileged background, uh, how do you see how dangerous, how worrying is what is happening to India's Muslims today?
I think it is very worrying.
Okay.
Because as I see, during those times, even when I talk about, like when I in my book I talk about those times when there was riots and violence, but there were acts of courage, there was empathy, even among that people used to feel, and I in today's times I think the violence against Muslims has been so normalized
Yeah.
and in fact celebrated. It has become celebrated.
You're heroic if you
Mhm.
and that is exactly the caveat that I wanted to make, that with lynching I don't see those acts of courage and kindness. They
Yeah.
become very rare,
Yeah.
and that is what terrifies me about what is going on. That I see fewer and fewer. I mean, uh, in the Karwan-e-Mohabbat, we sort of visited more than 100 families who have been affected by lynching, and we're working with them. In each of those places, I almost beg to say somebody must have intervened. Somebody must have tried to save you.
Yeah.
And the story almost always is no one. So that is why you think.
Yeah, and even with, if especially when it concerns Muslims, like all of these, when like people rewarding and garlanding people, those who were killers,
Yeah.
and and like at the
Including
same,
ministers.
including ministers.
There's a larger cautioning and brutalization of our.
Yeah.
So you see that.
And one more thing, like especially if concerned for Muslims, I think in many ways, like, and I differentiate the India which is constructed by the state and the media and physical India. I always make a distinction between that idea of India
and lived India.
and lived India. I'll say that
Yes.
the idea that they want to create and the media wants to create, it is basically where like Muslims are less than human. Like they are not even humans. They are less than cows. They are not even.
Yeah, so they're not citizens and they're not even equally human.
Yeah.
And yes, and the life of a cow is now increasingly being presented as more significant than the life of a Muslim.
Life and I think that is in fact, like, and all of those things like are getting normalized and accepted, and like the discourse that is the, like, either through Bollywood, either through media, or through like just like through politics, even like this is probably perhaps the first time in Indian politics, like the last few years, that no India has, no Muslim has position of power in the center.
Yeah,
No minister.
No, I mean, the ruling party has not a single Muslim MP, and in most states doesn't even have a Muslim MLA, yeah, which is a very conscious, not just erasure but expulsion from political representation that we are seeing.
So I was thinking, like, even a place like this, where I grew up, and like ghetto, like people don't generally come across, Muslims otherwise except their colleges or their schools or workplaces. So in 1970s, America actually brought housing in which blacks will be situated in the middle of the city where whites will live along. So India, the reverse is happening.
Yes.
The government wants to further ghettoize you. The state wants to further communalize you.
Yes.
I think, like, we need radical action which is totally opposite to what is happening.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like, if you think about Muslims and the dangerous, like, I think what is more concerning me is a general apathy, like from law enforcement, even from the extended family, when an act of violence happens. So in the old times, like even just 2 decades ago, like if there was an act of violence, the extended family or the neighbors will fight for that person.
Yeah.
But now the fear of the state is so dominant in people's minds, and I see that it's so magnified. Nobody will even try to help the victim, lest they come under a radar. So like even somebody trying to save the life of a victim might bring ramifications on them.
Can I give you a concrete example of this? I wanted to do what we did after the Gujarat riots, which is actually to observe every anniversary by honoring people who saved lives. And you know what happened? Almost without exception, the people the Hindus who saved lives say, please, please don't put our name out there, we'll get into trouble.
Yeah.
And that again stuns me, that if I've committed an act of hate, I'm a hero. If I've committed an act of courage and kindness in the middle of this storm of hate, I'm terrified.
Yeah, and love is seen as
Yeah.
as a very, very terrifying thing.
Yes.
And I think even in hate has, what hate actually does is, it removes nuances from that person's personality. And what love actually does is add a lot of nuance which doesn't even exist sometimes.
Yeah.
When you talk about just lovers will find their lovers,
Yeah.
in different ways. And when you hate somebody, a community or something, you will end all the differences within the community. That's why when somebody says, almost Hindus are like this, so and I always interject like this.
Yeah.
It is very easy to say this.
To
Then
generalize
you
like
are,
this.
or all Jews are like this.
Yeah.
I will never buy into those theories, because when you are amplifying things, when you removing the nuances and diversity among people,
Right.
that itself become an act of hate. So acknowledging that diversity and nuance in people's lives. So I, even, it will be very easy for me to, let's say, that people, just near, and during time, sometimes they all sometimes also play provocative songs, but at once in a while, they will, same people at same time, they will actually help their Muslim friends at also. So I have to look very closely, which person is safe and which person is unsafe. That blanketization of human beings under one umbrella, because I was when I growing up as a Muslim, I was very hurt by this. When somebody, this happened to Muslims first. Somebody, committed an act of terror someplace, and it is somehow the collective fault of all Muslims.
All Muslims.
So
But an act of communal violence is never the collective fault of all Hindus.
all Hindus.
Yeah.
So if I will not, if something that has happened to me, I have personally felt and being hurt by it, I will never partake in doing it to somebody else. So at this, I think that is where the fight back resistance starts.
Just staying with this upsurge of both hate and violence. Another book along with yours, which I found very, very significant, is Kunal Purohit's book on Hindutva pop. And a point that he makes is that earlier, in major episodes of communal violence, we used to see this, an explosion of hate on a particular, like a train has been burnt in Godhra, Mrs. Gandhi has been assassinated, etc. Now he says that we are seeing, like, every time we open our phones in the morning and look at our WhatsApp, we get a new dose of daily hate. I think that's a very, very significant observation. So, also the nature of violence itself. One of the things that has repeatedly come to me when we make these journeys to families affected by lynching, one of the things they repeatedly say is, I wish they just shot him. I wish they just put a knife into him.
Yeah.
Why were they so cruel? Why did they gouge out his eyes? Why did they smash his genitals? Why? So, do you see a transformation, in this climate of normalized hate, where actually you're singing catchy songs and humming them, which are so hateful? In the midst of this, is the nature of violence also becoming more endemic, more brutal? How do you see it as a young Muslim living in a place that has a history of violence?
I think like Kunal Purohit talks brilliantly in his book Ash Pop, and I do think like it's very sad and strange that we have so less books about Hindutva. People trying to analyze Hindutva. I, as a Muslim, find it very difficult. I have to tell my own stories. But I think
yeah,
like
it's very important for us to tell the story.
and like so like Hindutva in itself has become a very different kind of ideology, which is very different from which is very different from, let's say, fascism, which is its own kind of fascism.
Yeah,
let's
it's a
say
new kind of fascism.
fascism.
Absolutely.
And it has religion, politics, and it shows itself to be include Hindus of all castes, and we are open to it shows itself that we are also more women friendly, let's say, Muslims. So in that sense it is tries to
just to amplify that, it's a very interesting observation that with caste, Hindutva can never offer equality.
Yeah.
But what they are offering is belonging. And so instead of equality, you're getting belonging. And for people who've been so excluded, even that is something that they're grateful for. No.
Yeah, and like with what like when you talk about like how Hindutva, like, so it has almost become a celebratory, like an act of violence against Muslims or burning their shops
is a heroic act.
Is a heroic act, and I see that because I am somebody who also have the privilege of reading Hindu texts, unlike many of my Hindu friends. Like, so in that sense, like, there is always a like a concept of Rakshasa, which many Dalit historians says that is very Dalit focused. But slowly that Rakshasa, that person, and with the Sangh and its that is moving towards people who profess Abrahamic religion, Muslims and
so the demon is now increasingly the Muslim and the Christian.
And the Christians. And it's not even like hidden. The government like the RSS, which is like the parent body of the BJP, and bunch of thoughts like like they actually write like that Hindus, Muslims and Christians, they cannot ever be true nationalists, Indians. And so and that act of raising like Savarkar and Goalkar to the act of heroes, I think that is when we think when people think about BJP or RSS, they think they will many of these people haven't even read their original text or read their original ideology, and for some reason they believe that they will be better than what they claim to be. I think the BJP and RSS, they have been very true to what they say, keeping like they have always said that we will remove Article 370. We will
They are ideologically clear, and they've been consistent in pushing that ideology. Those of us who believe in the values of the Constitution and the freedom struggle have done very little to pursue it.
To have that kind of clarity. And like even when we look at the politicians who are talking about Muslims and their rights, they are so on the back foot most of the time, except perhaps
and defensive.
So like somehow, like even taking the name of Muslims in any platform is seen as something that will harm them. So at any point, like so this I don't know, like there is a concept called spiral of silence, and like when nobody really speaks, that spiral of silence keeps growing, and we are right now in a spiral of silence. There are so many people, if you talk about it, even people who are very regular BJP voters, and if you talk to them, have a very heart to heart conversation, they will say that this government has not done well for even them. If you talk to Dalits, they will agree that the government hasn't done any but
yet every third Dalit voted BJP.
So and then they are working very minutely on the micro narratives of areas. So like even in like, let's say, in a Dalit area, they will go there and they will promote a local deity and build a temple, and that will win them the votes. So their politics is very very grounded
and flexible
unlike the people who claim who are progressives. So in that sense, like what the Modi regime in the last 10 years have very successfully done is like making like an act of what the kind of discussions that we are having
Yes.
become like a very, very dangerous thing to have.
Yeah, so because the other face of the person who commits an act of violent hate is
Yeah.
the hero.
Yeah.
The person who speaks about love is the anti-national.
Is the anti-national.
Yeah. So that's the other side of the same coin.
And I see like like when you talk about like this kind of the sharpening of those divisive lines is prevalent more in perhaps middle class, upper middle class people. But like working class people, Hindus and Muslims, like there is an e-rickshaw who will be going here,
Yeah.
and like there will be a woman in burqa and a woman in sari sitting side by side in
Yes.
that e-rickshaw, and that is like most of Aligarh at any point in the day.
And nicely chatting and
Nicely
sharing.
chatting and talking about those communities of being a woman of the house. So they have much more exposure of meeting people from the other community, while people in metropolitans and they have more the option of shutting themselves off from the world. So there is that kind of if you shut yourself off from the world, you have more fears in your head. I am not saying those fears are not are not relevant. Those are relevant, but at the same time, these kind of bridges, that kind of stability that India has, it is given by people who are working class.
No, I really find fascinating what you're saying. I mean, I repeatedly feel that it's privileged Indians who have let India down
Down.
and are really letting India down more and more. Because in America, they say that if you're white, there's a much greater chance you'd vote for Trump. But if you're white and with a university degree, the chances go down deeply. Here, if you're upper caste Hindu, greater chance you'll vote BJP. Upper caste Hindu with a university degree, much greater chance. In a very privileged institution, even greater chance. So it is our privilege, and so what you're saying is what I'm hearing you say is that ordinary working class in Indian Muslims, even young people, even those who are suffering a lot, feel rooted and feel and feel that this is a phase that will pass.
This is a
and this country will remain ours.
On the other hand, I will also be very truthful about it. Some people like it's not as if like because they are also trying to adjust to the current climate. Some people are also like slightly thinking about like adjusting to the BJP being here for a lot of years. So instead of
Making strategic
being
alliances.
strategic.
Returning to the book a little bit and your everyday life, I want to come to the question of the Muslim ghetto. And it's it's a stereotypical kind of image. And the assumption is that look at these places, they have, they're unsanitary, they have narrow lanes, open drains, and very few public facilities. And yet Muslims choose to live there. This is a kind of assumption. But looking at it very much more carefully, I just recently wrote an article about why Muslims live apart. And there's so much data now which shows that Muslims don't choose just, by and large, it's just I want to be with other Muslims. It's not what they choose. They are blocked from coming into mixed areas by landlords who won't process, even by laws in places like Gujarat, and also by fear of violence. So you've lived in this ghetto here where we are sitting. Why have Muslims constituted this ghetto? And it's an old historical ghetto.
Yeah.
And how do you understand? Is it a choice?
I think I don't think so, because like if you ask like 10 people of this locality and ask them like where they would want to go, they would want to escape the ghetto. I was one of them at one point in my life, and like and there are very few people who would not want to move out and live in a better facility, a place with paved roads, a place with better facilities, a place with ATM, place with schools,
Yeah.
place with hospitals. This area, which has like nearly let's say 500,000 population, doesn't even have one hospital.
And this is not by chance. I mean, we've studied this carefully. There's a systematic denial of public services and facilities where there are large Muslim populations.
That people have, it's not a very abnormal thing to be more affiniated. People have affinity toward people who are more culturally similar to them, and like you move out of these boxes sometimes, but it's fine. It's a fine human tendency. But when it's done by, let's say, like people in power, like Hindus, it's seen as a very normal thing to do. Okay, I like to live with Bengalis, what's the problem? But if Muslims do it, and most of the time, like if I look out for a home in Bombay, I tried looking for a home. Like many people, like in Saif Ali Khan, could not find a home.
Yes.
Being a Muslim in Delhi, 8 out of 10 brokers will say no. People
Yeah.
believe these are stories. If you have to go to Jamia and get an auto, you will have to like 5 denials, and after that somebody will go.
Yeah.
So like all of these are not stories; these are realities, lived realities that people do live.
Banks, ATMs, all of that.
ATM. There is no bank in, like, if you go to like the Hindu area, like there are 3 banks. I feel like a very person who feels angst against like them, but I don't. I feel hurt because there isn't a bank in my area.
Yeah.
And and it's not, and they're like, okay, like if you think like it's unsafe, I don't think it's unsafe. The crime rate is not much, which is also people think, like even elite Muslims think that Muslim ghettos are criminalized.
Mhm.
I actually find it to the contrary.
Yeah.
I find it like it's much safer, to live here. It's much, it is, in fact, the crime rate here is so low,
Yeah. No, and all of these are stereotypes. I was reading this very beautiful account of Shaheen Bagh, where the crowds used to be by a woman, and she said that in a place which was packed with people, she said, I never felt as safe as I felt in Shaheen Bagh.
Yeah.
That I was always treated with a certain degree of dignity and respect, the kind that I wasn't assured anywhere else. I do still worry that this increasing, I know every riot or episode, like Delhi,
Delhi
like the Northeast Delhi. One of the interesting things was that it is the largest district, working class. It was the least served by public services. I mean, we have something like 450 mohalla clinics in Delhi. There wasn't even one in this entire district, and it's not a by chance sort of. So both high Muslim population and working class, you don't have a chance. You won't get good schools or anything else. But in a place like this, there was at least the solidarity between people of different communities. Everybody was living in each other's. You had a Muslim landlord with a Hindu tenant, a Hindu landlord, Muslim tenant, and all of that. That's completely broken down. People have segregated. So increasingly, with this climate of hate and acts of collective violence and fear of collective violence, if people begin to live more and more separately, when you don't know, you've never studied with a Muslim, you never traded with a Muslim, you don't have Muslims in your workplace, then somebody tells you that they have tails on their back, you'll start believing it because you've never had a chance to deal with them. So isn't this enforced separate living actually one of the most dangerous prospects to the continuance of the idea of India as we know it?
Yeah, I think I really find it like, I think this enforced ghettoization that the BJP is, all the state, and I will not even, let's say, like, and also other parties. We should start mentioning also other parties.
In fact, everything that the BJP has done wrong, the first steps have always been taken by other parties.
Yeah. And so like they are also following it, and like that kind of one-upmanship, like even in like even encounters, forced encounters of people, extrajudicial killings. Like I think all of those things are creating an atmosphere of fear of the other, and our society is living in a constant state of anxiety, and not just Muslim. And I keep repeating this, it's not just Muslim, it's Hindus too.
Yeah.
The kind of atmosphere that is being created, it's Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, everybody is feeling threatened for their own existence.
Yeah.
And when we think about Muslim ghettos and even what the state is doing to Muslims, economics is a big part of it. Economic boycott and denial of jobs, and removal of their shops from central location that happens in Himachal, and that kind of economical boycott of Muslims that is happening. They have no other options.
Expulsion. I mean,
Expulsion.
Uttarakhand, of course, is that extreme example where there is a conscious political project of the BJP to expel 14% of the population, which is the Muslim population.
And
so that's
last thing I'll say, like, I don't know, I would not want this ghetto to go away. In even as a cultural artifact, even as a cultural artifact that like then there is Ramzan and there's small lanes. I think because there is nostalgia attached to these lanes, these small lanes and this way of living, I will if this goes away, I'll be very sad. This has been my childhood. I find it beautiful. I find old Delhi beautiful.
Yeah,
I find Nizamuddin beautiful.
I find old Bhopal very beautiful, where I've spent. Yeah, I agree with you. It's also a way of life which we should celebrate. There's one last question I want to ask. So, before we started this interview, your mother had made some really nice food for all of us, and she spoke about her dream for you, and her central dream is that you get married one day. So inshallah you'll get married one day and you'll have children. And I just want you to sort of put yourself in a time machine, go forward. Like you said, you'd go back to where your Abu was in 1947. Go forward 20-25 years. What kind of India do you expect your son and daughter to grow up in one day?
I think I would want India to, that India, which is slightly bored of this communalization, and then they are talking about other things, because India, by nature, I'm still a believer of idea that Nehru and Gandhi proposed, and India that is at the end of the day, I find India chaotic and diverse and beautiful and all kinds of, like, there is no country like India in the world, and like I would want them to grow up exploring all the possibilities of what India can be and what they can be. So in that sense, India, when you go to Western countries, it's very structured, very organized
and homogenized
and everybody lives in a similar kind of a home. Everybody has a similar kind of a car, and India, it's a colorful country. I go out, I see all kinds of people. I would want India to retain this sense of diversity and brotherhood while being
and chaos
and slight bit of chaos, which is also a part of India. But I think, like, I would not want India to be homogenized and simple, and I don't like whoever is watching this, I don't think anybody would want an India like, or a country where everybody is similar.
Yes.
I find that utterly boring. I would I find that idea, like, everybody which the BJP or like the state or capitalism just try to homogenize everything.
So there was this journalist, Saeed Naqvi. He went to Pakistan, and when he came back, people asked him, how do you like Pakistan? He said, I loved Pakistan in many ways, except for one thing. So he said, what? He said, too many Muslims. He said, we've got so used to living in this very diverse society that I found it boring. Very similar to what you're saying. So this is your dream for your children. This is your hope for your children. What is your expectation? What kind of India will your children grow up in? Last question.
I think, like, right now, I think this idea that we are always in a constant state of panic, all of us, in some way or the other, Hindus and Muslims and Christians and Sikhs and anybody who live in this country, is expecting something bad to happen almost all the time.
Right.
I think that is what the powerful want us to feel like. And I think to
And-
not feel like how they want us to feel like, and sometimes not being afraid, and just to be a little courageous,
Yeah.
is somehow that they don't want us to be.
And the orderliness that you talked about, the boring thing in Western countries,
Yeah.
it's a substitute for this fear.
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
sure.
But we want the chaos, but we still want an absence of fear. Do you expect that to happen?
I think at some point I realized that like if we were not courageous, if we were there were people who did not believe in this fear, there will not be Shaheen Bagh, there will not be farmers protest,
Yeah.
there will not would have been the India's freedom struggle,
Yeah.
and the thousands of protests where people come out to express themselves. And I think even though I expect India, like I I do think there are troublesome times ahead. I think it will be very, very troubling, especially for Indian Muslims, especially poor Indian Muslims,
Yeah.
because it is not apart from the violence, there is economic boycott and economic hardship that are coming their way. At the same time, discrimination in schools, in government jobs, and all of those things.
And private sector jobs
Pri-
even more so.
Even private sector job. So the and people say that even in schools, like the kind of Islamophobia that is prevalent even in school children.
Yeah.
That is the worst thing that can happen. I always ask people, like Hindus, do you want your children to grow up in that kind of society?
Yeah. To
Do
be
you
that kind of person. Yeah.
do you like, is that a good kind of a society that you want your child to grow up to be? So I think at some point I think it will be troublesome, but I am very sure, like at some point there will be courageous people who will rise up, who will fight for this idea of India. But I am not sure, like whether how it will be 20-25 years ago, but at some point, like India is a very, even like not being even hopeful. Let me be very grounded. India is a very cyclical country. It will entertain some rulers for some time, see how they are doing, be more like, let's say more like clowns what they are trying to do, and when they get bored, they will kick them out. And either through uh, grassroots grassroots movement, either through elections, and I don't see that process happening. We are too much too much of we have such less, we have such less attention, such less distraction, that we will at some point we are bound to get bored of what is going on. And I hope that happens sooner, because if that goes longer, I hope that doesn't happen after a prolonged kind of genocide or a violence or a civil war, whatever people think the worst thing that can happen. I hope that kind of sanity is reached before that
Before
happens.
we.
And that I hope, but that is a possibility. Somebody like me will not run away from a possibility that like at the same time hate crimes have been rising uh, a lot more than the media reports.
Yeah.
So like I think, and like even like witch hunting or illegal arrest of Muslims is exponentially risen in the last few years. So it is I think like this is a very, very worrying time. We need political movements at the ground. That's what I want. That's what I think will happen. At some point, that is bound to happen. So, with that belief, India is still the land of Gandhi, who mobilized a lot of people in diversity.
And for a country of kindness, actually.
And this hate, even though it is the dominant ideology, they are at the power. Like the people in power have all the mechanism at their ground, even though it has taken them so many years to change India. I think they will find their resistance even growing stronger in the days to come. I hope that.
So, Ziyad, I mean, you said many beautiful things, and you said an ideology of hate has no nuance. An ideology of love has great nuance. And I think your answers, even where you find hope in the future, despite had contained a great deal of nuance, and wisdom and hope and some naive. I mean, I feel at some level
Yeah.
If people ask me, my ideology is one of, if you like, naive hope.
Yeah.
And I think we both share that.
Share that night.
Yeah, that we will overcome.
Yeah.
We will build the country of love and equality and justice that we, the people of India, had promised ourselves.
Hopefully, inshallah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Partitions of the Heart. You can find more Himal podcasts like the South Asia Review of Books and State of South Asia on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Support Himal's independent journalism by becoming a Himal patron today. We'll be back soon with another great conversation. See you then.